Hey, what's up guys, it's Bronson. In today's video we're going to be tattooing a black and grey realistic portrait, and this video is packed with useful tips to help improve your tattooing. So let's get into it. So I'm starting off using a bigger needle than I usually would. Usually I'll start off with a 13 round mag, and here I'm using a 23 round mag. Just from the size of this piece, it's almost a full A3, so for any chance of finishing it in one session, I really want to step the size of my tools up. Something a bit more brush-like, and especially as soon as I start the tattoo, I want to use the biggest needle I can, because I find in my first hour I get a lot done, and if I start off with a bigger needle, or a smaller needle, sorry, then it'll mentally slow me down and I'll only be covering a small space. So just like starting off with oil painting or something like that, I really want to start really just laying down some ink. And you can see it's not just my needle choice, it's also the way that I'm working. I'm really starting off by trying to lay a lot of background down and get a lot of these tones in and start mapping things out, and then come back and then add in the detail later on, especially to get caught up in getting everything so perfect in the small section of tattoo. I'm not even really onto the hand yet, so this is such like a minor aspect. I even actually overdid it trying to be so fast. There were areas where I'm tattooing now where the tones weren't smooth and I was getting a bit of that kind of like needle jump, so I did have to slow my hand speed down a little bit. I realized that quite early, and the fundamentals, even though I'm trying to be fast, the fundamentals are still good, you know, like the black that I'm packing is solid, and then these tones that I'm using are really smooth as well. So I do slow my hand speed down a little bit more, but it was important for the tattoo to see my limit. So how fast can I mag these light and mid tones in with it being smooth? You know, starting off this tattoo, everyone's skin is different, so you really want to like, I was kind of like finding my limits with this tattoo. What pace can I work at? What pace is the skin gonna want me to work at? So I really, it was good that I pushed that limit and found that out early. And you can see with my mag work here, I'm really thinking about what I'm tattooing in relation to the image and what it actually is, making that groove in between the knuckles there, and then washing it out to be a bit smoother on the edges. And also positioning the mag in a way where if I am getting a bit of a choppy texture, then I want to pick that up to almost be like a hyper-realistic skin grain. I want that slight needle jump or choppiness to be in the right direction if it's there, and if I want to purposely use it. If you don't want that kind of choppy texture to appear, I'd recommend maybe slowing down your hand speed or putting a little bit less pressure behind the mag just to smooth it out a bit more, or working in a lighter tonal value and really packing that tone in so that the skin is fully saturated with more passes over the area. And you can see I'm doing that now with the video playing at normal speed, quite a slow hand speed with my machine on 11.2 volts. So I'm really just focusing on fully saturating the skin with this light tone. So it is my extra light tone dipped in my light tone just to give it a bit more body, and then I'm really just slowly passing over that, getting it really nicely saturated. And one of my biggest things that helped me tattoo quite fast was almost blocking in areas. So there's some string running down over the fingers, and when I was tattooing the hand, I wasn't moving left of that string. I was just staying to the right of it and saturating and building up all the tones there, and then moving on to these fingers on the left. And I think by doing that, you don't overload your brain. You have the simple task and you can work in that block and then go back to your reference and really look at your values and all of that, all the direction of your values and everything. I think it makes all the problem solving with tattooing and just a general process a bit faster and easier. Especially with realism, I think it's really important not to overload yourself with too much information. If you're looking at a small area in your reference, you're going to take in all that information a lot better rather than looking at the full portrait at one time, for example. Just keep it quite simple and really identify what your reference is doing. So here I'm just starting to border the jawline and some of the features outside of the face to start mapping that out a little bit, and then I can work out of my black tone and make sure that that transition is smooth, bordering around the hood that's on this portrait. And then there's also some smoke that I kind of freehand in on that right side, just so that the portrait isn't ending on a solid block of black. There's some nice flow in there to help break that up. And some of the smoke is flowing over the portrait, so I'm making sure that I'm using my smoothest mag, which is our largest one, the 23 round mag. There's a lot more resistance from the needle, so that the texture and the tone is going to be really nice and smooth, as opposed to if you use like a 9 mag or a 9 flat for the extreme example. It's going to show a lot more texture and not saturate as smoothly. I'm really focusing on the jawline here. It's such an important start to every portrait. It has that black edge, and then the neck area is slightly more lit up, so it's not leading on to black, so there's a crisp kind of edge, and then that's really fading up quite quickly into a light tone. So with my mag, I'm making sure to use it on its edge and work a hard edge on one side on the lower end, and then as it gets higher, that softer movement. And also you can see I've drawn a few lines and stuff over the face. The client kind of wanted that look, so I drew those on the iPad. And it's really important that you don't just draw a straight line. You really want to take in the curves of the face. So think about that part as the chin comes up. And a really good indicator of that was, like I was talking about before, where that black shadow from the jawline got lighter. That was showing me kind of where that roll of the jaw, that kind of angle was going. So I was able to turn that direction there, and then also obviously tattoo that area darker, being in the shadow. And you can see I'm also mapping in the texture and kind of grooves in the lip with a 13 round mag on its side, getting in those nice textures and grooves that are there. And I think a liner can just put them in a little bit too harsh sometimes. And then I'm starting to map in some of the lip as well. Usually I'll map an area with maybe a light or a mid-tone, but the areas that I'm certain are black, I go and put those into. It's always quite nice and easy to work out of shadows and pull these tones out, but you also don't want to jump to using black if you're in question of an area, because you don't want to overdo the black tone. And you can even see I haven't changed to a lighter value. I'm still using black, but I'm almost just scratching the surface just to map in that shape for me. It's still the black value, but I'm really not putting much pressure behind the needle, just so it's giving me that stencil there so I can get in and put all this detail in. And as I'm getting into this kind of running paint texture, I'm making sure just to use my mag as well. I do drop back down later with a 7 round liner and give some sharp points of the paint at the end, almost like a build up of the grip kind of thing. But I do want to keep it really like a wash. And if you go too heavily outlined, I think the contrast, if it's outlined, just sets that look too far away. I'd rather keep this as a washed look, and then that way it's not going to take too much away from the portrait as well. we're still going to see and appreciate a lot of these shades on the cheekbone and coming in from the shadows of the jaw. So the camera's a bit blurry here, but you can see, I'll just show you guys that I am just working on saturating this area. So this is with my light tone here as it is approaching the kind of highlighted side of the portrait. So I'm starting to saturate this. And you can see with me shaping the nose, once I've blacked in where the kind of nostrils are and some of those heavier shadows, I'll just start shaping in those light tones using the edge of my mag and making sure that I'm tilting it and working hard to put in the angles that are there and the highlights that are left as well. And a lot of my work is done with a 13 round mag, so you can see there the whole mag was over the skin, but only the edge of it was touching, and it's creating a nice transition for me there. And as I pass over and saturate it more, it's going to do what I want it to do and have that kind of shadow, almost like the key line of a shadow. And now I'm just starting to saturate more of the portrait. Working in a few of these dark edges, and then I get through and start the soft saturation of my lighter values. And it's really important, I will slow this next bit down just so you can see the direction that I'm always working. I really try and think about the direction that I'm actually wanting to push this needle in, because the face just isn't flat. You know, so you have to think about all these angles if you want to make a really nice looking portrait, and you have to have a lot of understanding of what's actually going on, where these dips and curves are that are naturally there. And like we were talking about earlier, achieving a smooth tone with your light and extra light tones is really about more passes with a slower hand speed and slightly less weight behind the needle as well. Just let the machine do the work and pass over it without damaging the skin. And now that I have a bit of dark there mapped in to help be a guideline, I'm sort of finalizing the lower half of this portrait as well as I go. It's a bit like what we were talking about earlier, having that small area blocked. So this is now what I'm calling half the portrait. So now that it's all mapped in, I can go through and finalize, and I haven't overdone trying to look at too much of the reference at once. I've really gridded off areas. And as I'm starting this left side, I'm definitely just going to use my mag here because I don't want any detail to overdo what the portrait has. If there's more detail to the side, it's going to be a bit of a distraction. So I want that contrast there of the heavy detail all in the center and almost like a blurry off to the side. And then there's smoke quite heavily going on over the portrait on this left side. So I am just taking the time to put that in and also starting to work on the side of that nose and get these shadows in. And you can see here that I didn't tattoo the top kind of section of the nose or above the nostrils yet while doing the lower part of that portrait. And that's just because there's a lot of information that comes from where the nose joins in from the eyes. So I wanted to include that and almost start the upper section of the nose from the eyes. So I'm not jumping ahead, and I'm not just tattooing a nose, I'm tattooing a portrait that's all connected and making sure that everything's flowing well. I really feel like a portrait is tattooed well just from knowing like 100 of these little tips. So I really hope that you guys are learning something useful and that can help your portrait game, you know, and your realism tattooing in general. Now you can see I'm mapping in the eye with a light or a mid-tone with not much pressure behind it. Just kind of mapping in these shadows for me to start building out of and these aspects in the eye. Then once I have my form achieved, I go and put the black in the areas that are definite and start working on saturating this eye. We have gone for kind of like a whited out eye at the client's request. And just putting the video into normal speed now, you can see I'm finding a direction with these eyebrows, and then I just go in with quite a bit of weight behind the needle and chop these like feathered in kind of eyebrows. And then once you get to the back of the eyebrow, the direction changes, but it's kind of similar. And this eyebrow is dropping down and fading into the shadow there. So I don't even have to worry about that lower left hand side because it becomes quite a heavy shadow. And now just pulling some of these shadows down onto the nose, and then there's that section of smoke that's crossing over quite a bit of the portrait as well. So working around that softly with a larger mag, so I'm not creating too much of a hard edge, and keeping smoke in that kind of natural soft aspect. And then finalizing and making some of the values a bit darker and fuller, saturated around the eye. And do just remember that my style of tattooing is quite heavily saturated. There's not really a wrong or right to tattooing. So, you know, with everything that I'm saying, you need to kind of try it or think about it and see if it works for your tattooing. You know, this is like how I tattoo is one of 100 ways. So if you're feeling like everything I'm doing is so opposite to what you're doing, then perhaps just kind of stay on your course or talk to other people that are close to you, and just work out what's best for you. You know, tattooing is a lot about finding your groove. You don't just pick up a tattoo machine and start perfecting work straight away. And now just putting in a little bit of work in this left side of the portrait with the eye, and then also the smoke, and then the hood that was above the portrait as well. So just mapping all of this in with a larger mag, and especially next to where the smoke is overlapping the portrait, I want to bring that smoke forward by almost having these blurrier facial aspects. So the eyelashes and stuff on this side closer to the smoke, I might blur them out a little bit more just to really show that that smoke is on front, you know. And then with this here again, you can see I am just using the mag to do the work for me and get that direction put in. And just a little tip, whenever I'm working out of black, I will dip into my mid-tone and then also into my dark or even a touch of black, just to dirty that pigment up so it's really going to match and transition well. And then I'll drop over that edge of the mid-tone with my light to get that nice transition. And I remember also when I started tattooing, this was like what people were getting tattooed, you know, like dark portraits, like real smoky, maybe like a bit of Victor Portugal kind of negative lines. It was like the coolest time to be coming into the tattoo industry and just seeing all these crazy pieces being done by the artists above me and stuff. I wasn't really ready to kind of get involved in that era too much. I definitely banged out a few, and it would be like 3 days of the week you'll be getting these crazy pieces like this coming in. It's really something that you take for granted. And now just starting my white highlights. I like to start with my sharpest highlights, so using that 7 round liner and then just putting in these really small sharp highlights. And you do want to pack it almost like a color. It doesn't quite go in, especially as a healed nice result, as easy as a black will. So really do just pack it in a little bit, take your time. And then I do move on to, after I do my sharp highlights, I do mag in a little bit just so there is some variation of the highlight, but only highlighting these major aspects. I'm not really sure about fully saturating a piece with white. Like, I like the look of it, but then I feel like maybe it suits opaque tattooing a little bit more. But that is a style that I do for my cover-up tattoos, almost using more of an opaque palette. And I do love the look of it. So, something to think about, and I'll kind of see what happens in the future. You know, I'm always keen to just make the best results, so whatever that is. But I guess you guys will see in the future whatever happens with my art and kind of the different paths that I choose to take. Thank you guys for watching the video and making it to the end. Make sure you like and hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next video.